According to French authorities, a man has been charged with plotting to kill French President Emmanuel Macron during a visit by Donald Trump to France for Bastille Day on July 14th. The suspect, who has been hit with preliminary terrorism charges, has reportedly expressed far-right nationalist opinions online and was caught after saying he'd been looking up potential targets on the internet. After being caught, French police reportedly found 3 kitchen knives in his vehicle. As of now, it's unclear whether Trump's presence at the event was a factor in the alleged plot.
One of the biggest music festivals in Sweden will not take place next year after reports of rape and sexual assault plagued this year's event. Reports vary on how many alleged attacks took place at the Bravalla Festival in Norrköping. The AFP news agency said police received 4 rape allegations and 23 sexual assault allegations between Thursday, June 29th and Sunday, July 2nd. According to the Associated Press, Swedish authorities reported 1 case of rape. The organizer of the festival announced Saturday that it would pull the plug on Bravalla 2018 due to the alleged attacks. Reports of sexual violence are not new to Bravalla. Several cases were reported there last year, as well as at other music festivals in the country. Swedish Prime Minister Stefan Löfven called on the country to improve security efforts in light of these most recent alleged attacks. For United News International, I'm Gabrielle Caldwell.
10 days of torrential rain have brought massive flooding to central China's Hunan province. Changsha, the capital city, has not been spared. Water from Xiangjiang River, a main tributary of the Yangtze River, is bursting its banks.
We can even go to the riverside to fish and play before, but the water has overflowed to the roads these days. It's the biggest floods that I've ever seen.
The water level of the Xiangjiang River in Changsha reached 39.49 meters on Sunday night, exceeding the previous record high of 39.18 meters set by massive flood in 1998. The worsening situation prompted an urgent flood control mission overnight. It's already midnight here in Changsha. People are still battling the floods. We can see the volunteers are piling up sandbags to prevent the dike from breaching.
Our main duty here is to fill the sand into bags and then carry the sandbags to the dike. I think more hands make the task more efficient.
Juzhizhoutou, the city's popular landmark, has almost been submerged. This has worried the locals, who are proud of the tourist attraction as well as the river. And a proper sandbagging as a defense against the water is harder than it looks.
The butt of a sandbag has to tightly pin the mouth of the next one, so that the wall made of the sandbags will stand firm here.
Besides Changsha, other cities are also stepping up disaster relief operations as water levels continue to rise. Not far from here in Ningxiang County, a mudslide triggered by the heavy rains has caused at least 6 deaths, and the search and rescue there is still going on. Yang Jinghao, CGTN, Changsha, Hunan Province.
Some breaking news now. Greek coast guards have reportedly fired warning shots at a Turkish cargo ship in the Aegean Sea. The vessel was heading for Izmir in the northwest when the Greek Coast Guard ordered it to divert to Rhodes Island. But as the ship was reportedly in international waters, the Turkish captain refused. The captain says there are more than a dozen bullet holes in the ship, but the crew is unharmed. We'll bring you more on that story as we get it.
On the streets of Venezuela's cities, at least 4 people have been killed during anti-government protests since Friday. According to the Attorney General and Chief Prosecutor, Luisa Ortega Diaz, Ortega has become a heroine to opposition supporters.
All the workers welcome that the Attorney General is with the Constitution and respecting the Constitution, like everyone who has raised their voice against the fraud that the government is trying to impose.
The government says Ortega is a traitor. It's banned her from leaving the country and frozen her bank accounts. She opposed Venezuela's Supreme Court when judges dissolved the opposition-controlled National Assembly in March. She's also challenged the socialist government's push to rewrite the constitution. And she's pressing charges against police officers accused of being linked to the killing of anti-government protesters. The Attorney General's office summoned the chief of Venezuela's intelligence agency on Friday, accusing General Gustavo González of being linked to human rights abuses. A few hours later, President Nicolas Maduro promoted the general to head of the army. Opposition protesters say they're determined to stop what they call attacks on Venezuelan democracy.
Today we are defending an institution, the chief prosecutor of the republic, which the government also wants to end. Maduro's government, the dictatorship of Maduro, does not only intend to end the National Assembly, but now also the chief prosecutor.
The protests are now into their 4th month. Tear gas continues to blow through the streets, and so does the battle for Venezuela's future. Rob Matheson, Al Jazeera.
According to the Canadian National Railway, around 20,000 gallons of oil was released following a freight train derailment in Illinois last week on Friday. A filing with the Illinois Emergency Management Agency said over the weekend that the cause of the crash is currently unknown. A report from the Chicago Tribune says that the incident occurred when 20 cars of a Canadian National Railway freight train carrying crude oil for Exxon to the state of Louisiana went off the tracks. Most of the derailed cars were cleared up over the weekend, while the cleanup of the oil is expected to last a few days longer. Recent progress in forecasting the intensity of hurricanes, which has lagged behind storm track forecasting, could be undermined by proposed cuts in federal funding for weather research. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration launched the Hurricane Forecast Improvement Program in 2009 with a $13 million budget. Funding has shrunk to less than half that, and President Donald Trump's proposed budget includes further cuts to NOAA and the National Weather Service.
From afar, they look like people enjoying a day at the beach. But on closer inspection, they're in fact king penguins. Flightless birds with a clumsy walk that have long fascinated adults and children of another two-footed species. It's the end of the breeding season as we take a ferry through the Straits of Magellan to Magdalena Island to see another breed, the Magellanic penguin, named after the explorer Ferdinand Magellan. Today, the island is a penguin colony sanctuary with access to tourists.
About 56,000 pairs of penguins came last year to mate and breed. We are seeing far fewer than in the past.
Accompanied by Fernandez and penguin expert Claudia Godoy, we learned that penguin colonies in South America are under threat. Climate change is one reason.
In Punta Tombo, the largest colony in Argentina, it is well documented that changing rain patterns force penguins to abandon flooded nests. Or worse yet, the chicks die of cold because they are still too young to regulate their temperature.
The Punta Tombo colony has diminished by more than half in the past 25 years, while another study indicates that 60% of Antarctica will be unfit to nest Adelie and emperor penguins by the end of the century. Warmer ocean temperatures have diminished the quantity and quality of fish for the penguins, who must swim further and further away to feed their young. But overfishing and ocean contamination, especially plastic, are also killing penguins. This sign outside Punta Arenas advertises a major tourist attraction that no longer exists.
Beyond this gate is the entrance to what for decades has been Chile's best-known penguin colony. Magellanic penguins used to come here by the thousands to breed, but now I find that the gate is closed because the penguin colony has been largely abandoned.
Many suspect that constant explosives and contamination from this giant coal mine operating on the Otway Sound may help explain the penguins' disappearance.
Nobody has taken responsibility for studying the different factors that are determining the dramatic drop in the Magallanes region. A colony disappears and no one does anything.
Penguins have been around this part of the world for tens of thousands of years. The question is, can they survive even a few more decades of changes to their habitat? Lucia Newman, Al Jazeera, Isla Magdalena, Chile.
A U.S. think tank says China has built new military facilities in the Spratly Islands in the South China Sea. The Asia Maritime Transparency Initiative said June 29th, satellite imagery shows new facilities have been built on Fiery Cross, Mischief, and Subi Reefs. The report said 4 new missile shelters have been built on Fiery Cross and that radar and communications facilities have been spotted on Mischief Reef. The think tank also said China is building underground structures there which could be used to store munitions. According to the report, Beijing can now, quote, deploy military assets, including combat aircraft and missile launchers, to the Spratly Islands at any time. Reacting to the report, presidential spokesman Ernesto Abella said Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte will maintain his, quote, non-combative stance towards China. Abella said Duterte will continue to pursue, quote, mutual understanding and dialogue with China. For United News International from Metro Manila, I'm Crystal Yap.
On Monday, Chinese President Xi Jinping set off on a visit to Russia, stressing the grave threat that a U.S. anti-missile system in South Korea poses to both Chinese and Russian interests. China has repeatedly stated its opposition to the U.S. Terminal High Altitude Area Defense, also known as THAAD. China says the system's powerful radar can probe deep into its territory, undermining its security and regional balance. The United States and South Korea have both said that the THAAD is solely aimed at defending the South from North Korea.
Currently, tension is high, and we certainly would like to see a de-escalation of tension, because if tension only goes up and goes up only, then sooner or later it will get out of control, and the consequences would be disastrous. And I'm sure it is in our common interest to avoid anything like that.
But too many details on what type of missile this was, according to a statement from the Joint Chiefs of Staff. It was a ballistic missile, but they're still listing it as unidentified. But Moon Jae-in, South Korea's president, has called a National Security Council meeting, an emergency meeting that will get underway in less than 30 minutes' time, where, of course, he will be being briefed on this latest launch and exactly what type of missile it was. It was fired in the north of the DPRK in Pyongan province, which is near the border with China, fired in the direction of Japan. And we are hearing from Japanese officials, they believe that the projectile fell within their, what they say is their exclusive economic waters. If this is true, then it's an indicator that this is at least a medium-range rocket, so it could be anywhere from medium up to long range, because sometimes the DPRK fires them at a very high trajectory. One of the most recent tests flew to about 2,000 kilometers in height, so well outside the Earth's atmosphere before splashing down in the sea, with a total distance traveled of only 500 kilometers. But the indication clearly, if the Japanese officials are correct, is this is at least a medium-range rocket. This will, of course, cause officials to watch closely, because the red line is considered to be an intercontinental ballistic missile. That is something that could potentially fly beyond 9,000 kilometers, could potentially hit the United States mainland. If it is this type of a rocket, then it will no doubt provoke an immediate call for tougher sanctions in the United Nations Security Council, but we're probably going to have to wait till the end of the day, perhaps even into tomorrow, to find out exactly what kind of rocket this was.
Now, Jack, the timing of this is very interesting, because in just the last couple of hours, US President Donald Trump had calls with Chinese President Xi Jinping and also Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, and they are also going to be meeting at this weekend's G20 gathering. Now, is this another reminder or threat from the DPRK?
Yeah, it certainly could be. All of the analysts I spoke to in the lead up to this G20 summit, whenever we talked about issues, they all said we expect another missile test from the DPRK, either in the lead up or during the actual summit itself. Now, There was mixed reactions on what that would actually mean, with some saying this is a sign that the DPRK just wants to push ahead anyway with its nuclear and missile programs, and it wants to send a clear message to the international community that it's not going to be cowed, that it will press ahead, and it wants to be recognized as a nuclear power. However, many analysts say because it hasn't crossed this red line yet, and we've still got to find out if it crossed the red line today, the red line being an intercontinental ballistic missile or a 6th nuclear test, because it hasn't crossed that line, this is most likely the DPRK just trying to prepare for negotiations, but with a tough bargaining hand. We haven't had a missile test in a couple of weeks. There is one other reason it could be. It is the rainy season here, it has to be noted. It has been pouring down for the past week or so. No doubt it is the case in the DPRK as well. And as you can see, today is the first time really that the rain has stopped, and perhaps the weather is permissible for a rocket test. But all of this, of course, will need much more analysis, some of it which we're probably not even going to get. But by the end of today or tomorrow, we should at least have the basics.
French President Emmanuel Macron and British Prime Minister Theresa May are urging all sides to take urgent steps to de-escalate the situation. Macron had a conversation with the Emir of Qatar, Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, and Theresa May spoke on the phone with the newly appointed Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman. Meanwhile, the German Foreign Minister Sigmar Gabriel met with his Saudi counterpart, Adel Al-Jubeir, during a tour of the Gulf region.
The best solution to come out of this conflict, then, I think, is a mutual agreement to end all support of terrorists or extremist organizations. We all know that it's not state-organized, but often by private individuals.
Qatar rejects accusations it funds armed groups and has delivered its response to the 13 demands from Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Egypt, and the United Arab Emirates. The contents of the letter haven't been released, but it's now with the Kuwait's Emir, who's been mediating in the dispute and helped arrange for a 2-day extension for Qatar to meet the demands of the 4 countries blockading it. The embargo by Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain, and Egypt has now been in place for almost a month. A list of demands were submitted to Qatar 10 days ago. These included shutting down Al Jazeera, cutting ties with Iran, closing a Turkish military base, and not associating with organizations like the Muslim Brotherhood, apparently regarded by Egypt and Saudi Arabia in particular as a threat to their sovereignty.
What's interesting about this is that, in their minds at least, this is all part of the same process, a sort of counter-revolution against popular uprisings that Qatar, one way or another, is seen to have supported. But it's also actually an implicit compliment, if you want to take the whole thing the other way around. It's basically to say that the forces that were there in 2011 in the Arab Spring are still there now and still threatening these guys whose only response is repression, cutting off the media, and opening fire on crowds.
The U.S. too has renewed efforts to resolve the crisis. Over the weekend, President Donald Trump held telephone conversations with the leaders of Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. The blockading states are due to meet in Cairo on Wednesday to consider Qatar's response to their demands. Qatar maintains the blockade as a violation of international law, a position backed by a number of legal experts. Paul Chadurjian, Al Jazeera.
Iranians have organized a Trumpism cartoon contest in which hundreds of participants were invited to submit artwork mocking the U.S. leader. The same organizers held a Holocaust cartoon contest last year, which they said was meant to highlight Western double standards on free speech and not to cast doubt on the Nazi genocide. The logo for the contest is based on the Nazi emblem, with a diagonal T in a white circle against a red background. One cartoon shows President Donald Trump painting a Hitler-like mustache on the face of the Statue of Liberty. Hadi Assadi of Iran, who won first prize and a $1,500 award, said he wanted to highlight the money-mindedness and warmonger nature of Trump. His cartoon shows Trump wearing a jacket made of dollar notes while drooling on books, a reference to cultural material.